Okay, so you have the peripheral nervous system, right? You have the central nervous system. And then you were talking about how do you say that again? The
autonomic nervous system.
The gut lining or...
Oh, yeah. The enteric nervous system, yes.
Welcome to the Revo Report. We're inspiring faith with reason and reason with faith.
So the autonomic nervous system is composed of the enteric nervous system, but then that branches out into two other things, which is so talking about the science and the physiology, there's the parasympathetic and sympathetic. And what's really cool in my mind is that there are so many children battling with ADHD. And the mechanism that Adderall and Ritalin and these various other drugs are, and by the way, they're all amphetamines. I mean, they're all different derivatives of amphetamines, but they increase catecholamine release, serotonin release, dopamine release. And what's interesting to me is that when you fast, you get a natural upregulation of that part of the nervous system. So you literally will mimic a state of having Adderall or Ritalin by nature of fasting. And so if the world and society took fasting more seriously, would we need at least as high of a dose of the Adderall or the Ritalin, or could we get off of it entirely? And in the process of learning that, let's say, coming to that physiological state through discipline and delayed gratification, now that child doesn't have a problem with any of those things. They stay focused. They understand what it means to wait. They understand what patience is. And you can't teach a child at 7, the long-term benefits of learning their science material or learning their alphabet or their math. But they can feel what it is to be hungry and to have delayed gratification. This is my point. It's if you want to talk to every human being in the world, communicate in a way that they can relate to. Move the metrics in that regard that they can really connect. And there's no more visceral, direct way of doing that than through food. And in particular, when you eat. And so this is why, going back to this concept of the monks of Mount Athos waiting 16, 18, 20 hours to eat every day, it's so crazy. And then embedded in the physiology is this process that literally heals you. And I know that was your original question. What are some of those things? But yeah, we can now blast off into that world. Now that we know maybe that our core is a little bit lower in us than our heads, it's maybe our gut. Now, what has God created in the physiology of our nervous system and physiology to make sure that we do get healing of both soul and body in the process?
Man, that is, I've never come across that. That could be the reason why also a lot of people will say, hey, when I fast, I don't have that brain fog. I can think more clearly. I myself kind of self-diagnose ADHD. And one of the things I noticed that when I did start fasting, that in the beginning it was a little bit tough, right? Because you go through that hunger pain and you're a little bit distracted. But I did notice that my brain fog kind of dissipated over time. What about fasting and also, let's say, drinking tea or drinking coffee? Some people will say, okay, well, as long as it's under 50 calories or whatever, you're still in that fasted state or you'll still hit autophagy. What do you think about those things?
Yes. I just tell people that I'm a purist on this. So nothing with a calorie for 16 to 20 hours a day. Nothing with a calorie. So green tea is fine. Coffee is fine. But I would not, as long as it's black coffee, long as it's clean green tea, so to speak, lots of water, carbonated water, etc. Caffeine is fine. I don't mind caffeine. Now, you might find yourself not eating as much of it because you're already in a sympathetic dominant state, so you don't need as much of an upper to stay up.
What is the reality sympathetic dominant stage? What is that?
Yeah. So when you fast, the sympathetic nervous system revs up, and you get this natural release of catecholamines, adrenaline, noradrenaline, epinephrine, dopamine, serotonin, and so you're getting that naturally. And so the reason I bring this up is, again, it mimics that ADHD sort of medicine program. But what it also does, too, is it starts breaking down fat more aggressively, too. So you could eat the same amount of calories, and studies show that you end up kind of burning a little bit more of your metabolism kind of rises over time because it's being turned on, because your body wants you to solve problems. What's interesting to me is that when you snack all day and you think, oh, I need more energy, you are turning on the other nervous system, which is the parasympathetic nervous system. That's rest and digest. In other words, every time you reach for a snack and you start digesting, you're turning your body, you're basically telling your body it's time to rest. And what's resting like? Sleeping. Oh my gosh, I'm I'm really struggling today. I can't stay alert and awake. Well, you're probably eating too frequently. And the average American eats 11 times over 15 hours. So they are not intermittent fasting at all.
Yeah.
And, lo and behold, the life expectancy of human beings anymore in America anyway is actually downtrending. But if the average American lives to 72 and I can get you 30 to 40% longer lifespan by intermittent fasting, I mean, what a powerful mission to take on. So, we talked about the nervous system, but when you get to 12 hours of not eating a calorie, autophagy starts to turn on. And that literally is your body getting rid of bad proteins, getting rid of bad organelles, getting rid of bad cells for that matter. It's just cleaning house. And then as you move into about 16 hours, you're now starting to burn fat for fuel instead of sugar. That's the glycogen that's in your liver and your muscle. And at that point now, you're burning fat, and ketones are actually very brain friendly. Again, going back to mental illness, it's interesting to me that a quarter of women in America deal with anxiety. And it turns out that ketosis, the ketones that are released from fat, are actually innervating the same receptors that a lot of the medications do to deal with anxieties. They're actually called GABA receptors. So when you drink alcohol, your wife after a long day of work wants to take, 2-3 glasses of wine down to help her relax. People want to take benzodiazepines to help them relax. Ketones innervate the same GABA receptors. And this is really powerful because, again, we have a huge problem with anxiety and depression in America. And if we can take care of that, here's another benefit. Here's another boost. But those ketones are very brain friendly. And just to show you how powerful they are, people who have seizures, one of the techniques for dealing with people with epilepsy, specifically certain types, but you can go on a ketogenic diet where you're only burning fat for fuel, and suddenly the epilepsy goes away. In fact, there was a doctor 100 years ago named Dr. Conklin who took this passage in the Bible very seriously, very literally. Prayer and fasting can only heal this epileptic. The apostles couldn't do it, but Jesus did it. But he says, hey, only by prayer and fasting. He did that to like 20 epileptics in the 1920s and didn't give them anything but water and vitamins, and the seizures went away. So,
wow.
It's our job, I think, as 21st century citizens to kind of go back into these texts and try to figure out like what wisdom we can glean from it. And when it comes to fasting, there's a lot to share. So that's just about ketones. We all know from the process of this fasting rule, and again, when I'm talking about fasting, I'm talking about Athos diet style. So that's intermittent fasting, that's plant-based food, that's a little bit of walking. But when you do it in this manner, blood pressure drops. You won't need the same blood pressure medication. You won't need the same insulin dose if you're diabetic. Your insulin resistance will decrease. Your insulin sensitivity will increase. Many people get off their medicines entirely. They're no longer diabetic. It's almost an irony to some extent that diabetics who struggle with insulin problems, we just give them more insulin. What we really need to do is to make them more sensitive to insulin. But that takes work and it takes faith. And so there's that. There's also these 7 molecules called the sirtuins. When you start going into this autophagy state or this fasted state, these sirtuins literally heal your telomeres, your DNA, your mitochondria. They make your metabolism more effective and more efficient. And so all of this starts to rev up with fasting. Your cholesterol drops. I've actually been tracking this personally with many of the people I work with this diet. They get tremendous reversal of their, let's say, lab values that used to be abnormal when it comes to sugar issues or cholesterol problems, inflammation of the liver, kidney function. All of this stuff starts to improve. In fact, wow, intermittent fasting is shown to improve your own cornea, and your retina. Really? Every cell in the body starts to improve its function and its effectiveness. They even say that intermittent fasting can help with hearing loss. So it's kind of like if we make the machinery in every cell optimal through something like fasting, because every medicine comes with side effects. Every medicine has its long-term problems. Every medicine loses effectiveness. You might need more of a dose. But isn't it incredible that God in his engineering of the world we live in would give us a mechanism, would give us a practice that could heal and take away so much suffering, and it affects every cell in our body. So by all means, we just need to keep fasting.